Hi, folks. My name is Girish, Bali, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today, we're going to talk to you about designing your life. Why do we care? Why do we want to do this? How do we want to do this? And who should do it? Those are the things that we'll be talking about today. And the main question is design. And the main question is life. Just keep that in mind today. And today we have a guest. Her name is Amber. She was sick before when we first scheduled this, and she was very kind enough to say sorry. But then we also met at Podfest in the Orlando, Florida. And I think I mentioned this like a couple of months back, maybe, I don't know how many weeks back, how many months back we did. But she's an amazing person, and I'm glad that I got her back. And she's going to be a friend of mine for the longest time, I hope. I really, really hope. So Amber, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for allowing me to come back after I so ungraciously bailed on you last time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As people, they say the invoice will be sent to you whenever you
Yes.
are ready. As you people say, checks in the mail.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about that, but think about it. I mean, there's a way to handle it and not a way to handle it. And while we say, "Hey, the check's in the mail," and we're joking, sometimes that check is like the hit on your reputation, the hit on a relationship, right? Like
Right, that's right.
nothing's free, but that's kind of
Exactly.
the way it goes.
And just keep it in mind, guys, when I say you people, I mean the people who don't want to pay. Okay. So keep that in mind.
Yes.
So Amber, thank you again for coming on Back to Basics. But before we start the topic for today, what does Back to Basic mean to you?
To me, I think it's everybody's goal on where they should be going. I think it's so easy for us to look at the advanced side of what our goals are and what our dreams are and think that we've made it to a particular point where we don't need to worry about the basics anymore.
Mm,
Whenever I'm working with a client who feels like they have stalled, the very first thing that we go back to is kind of taking away everything else back to the basics so that we can rebuild things the way that they should be.
mm,
The foundation, the basics of all things in life, depending on what your goals are, is kind of that foundation of the house that you're building that is
mm.
your life. And I feel like it gets overlooked way too often.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So thank you again, Amber, for answering that question. And thank you again for coming on Back to Basics. Definitely very honored that you're here. Amber, let me ask you a simple question. And I think everyone asks this on Google and everyone asks this in general. What is life to you?
Oh, life is, it's so interesting. I've never been asked this before. And I've been asked, like, what a successful life is. But what is life? To me, life is just the purest form of physical and spiritual presence in a place for
Mm,
as long as we have it. And each person's beliefs are going to dictate what life means to them.
mm,
And I think we then, once we have that definition of what life means to us, get to start to build kind of that blueprint that you and I have talked about that we're going to get into. Um, but at its rare basic form, I think life is the energy, the spirituality, and the physical presence that we have in each moment in each day and how we choose to spend that.
yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's not an easy answer. And thank you again for answering that. Then what is design for you?
Design for me is complete and utter intentionality in everything that you do.
Mm,
From building that blueprint for your life, the way that I describe it is you would never expect an architect to show up or a contractor to show up and start just building something without a plan. They don't just start nailing pieces of wood together and hope that at the end they have a finished product. There's
Mm,
a reason that an architect comes in and does the planning that they need to do, and then that gets executed down the road. So
mm,
that design element for me is, what are you building
mm,
on your life and your business and your relationships and your spirituality and your health and all of the areas of your life? How are those individual blueprints
mm,
playing into the big blueprint of your life,
mm.
so that now you can start to surround yourself with the tools, resources, and people that you need to build that design blueprint into fruition and actual reality?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for explaining the two words, because that's why I'm asking this question, because today we're going to be talking about life design or design life, right? And it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? The way you're explaining on your definitions. So now let me ask you this: when people they keep on saying that the house builds the family, or does the
Mm.
family build the house? That's the oxymoron statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what do you think on that?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think that if we're talking about this metaphorically in our life, right?
Mm,
The people that we choose to surround ourselves with are going to dictate what we believe we are capable of. And
mm,
as the people that we surround ourselves with continue to lift us higher,
mm,
we're going to build a more in depth and greater structure that is our life. If we choose to continue to surround ourselves with people with limited mindsets, with small goals, with the belief that life is whatever it's going to be and there's nothing that we can do to change it,
mm,
then what we end up with by definition will be small and limited as well. So
mm.
I think it's kind of the chicken and the egg question.
Yes.
And I think that it's the symbiotic relationship between the people building a belief and mentality in the person, and then the person being willing to jump out of their comfort zone. This is why when I talk about it, there are a lot of people that talk about life design, and there are a lot of people that talk about courage and getting out of your comfort zone. And for me, those two things cannot be talked about individually.
Mm,
My motto, my tagline for my business is design your life and have the courage to live it. Because
mm,
if you have courage without that blueprint and that design, then you have no idea where you're going, and you end up many times in places that don't fulfill you or make you happy.
mm,
If you have the blueprint and the design, but you're too afraid to do anything with it, then it's completely worthless. It's just
mm,
scratch paper.
mm,
So we get to combine those two things, and they don't exist without one another.
mm. So now the question is, thank you, Amber, for answering that question. So now the question is, does the why come first, or does the how come first?
Ooh, you know what? This is another one of those. And I love this question because I think why is dangerous.
Hmm,
There's two different ways we can look and think of why. And there's so many people out there that say, hey, start with the why, start with the why. And if you're talking about the purpose for you getting up in the morning, that as a why, then that is a great place to start.
hmm,
I am, as you know, a trained a certified trainer of neurolinguistics programming, or NLP. And in NLP, we never use the word why, because with why comes stories and
hmm,
pain and hurt, right? So then all of a sudden, start with why doesn't become the purpose of why we're getting out of bed in the morning, which is what Simon Sinek talks about it being. It
hmm,
instead becomes, why did this bad thing happen to me?
hmm,
Why am I here? That why is dangerous. So I choose to replace the word why with purpose. What is the purpose of every single action? What is the purpose of me doing this? Because purpose is forward looking. It's
hmm,
not backwards looking.
hmm,
It's even present. You can even have that present period, but to me why requires too much story and almost a victim
hmm.
mentality that kills any forward momentum.
So let me ask you this, and thank you again, Amber. But let's say if Amber tells me,
Hmm.
okay, that I don't like the way you're leading your life, the answer that I give is, why should I? And then the question is, why should I, to myself, right? So
Why should you what?
why should I change? Why does it matter what Amber is telling me?
Yeah. So the way that I choose to approach that question,
Hmm,
first of all, one of my absolute favorite people on the planet is Brene Brown. And honestly, she's my unicorn guest. I think every podcaster has that guest that we feel like we could just stop podcasting if we interviewed, right? Although we wouldn't, that's kind of the pinnacle for us. And then we find a new pinnacle. And for me, mine is Brene Brown. And she has a conversation about the arena. And if you aren't familiar with that, go check out her TED Talks. The arena comes from the man in the arena quote from President Roosevelt. And the idea is that it's the person that's in the arena that's living life, that's putting in the hard work. Their opinion is what matters. And I used to be a people pleaser. I used to be that person who would care
hmm,
what other people thought. And then I listened to her TED Talks, and there's a quote in one of her TED Talks where she says, "If you are not also in the arena getting your ass kicked,
hmm,
I am in no way interested in your opinion."
hmm,
And to me, that is one of the most powerful statements because as somebody who goes to a lot of personal development events and talks to somebody a lot, you know that the
hmm,
people who say what you just asked, "I don't like the way you're living your life," are
hmm,
never the people who are living their life to the fullest.
hmm,
They're the people who are living vicariously through you,
hmm,
and they don't like where you're going,
hmm,
so they have to comment on it. I don't
hmm,
care what those people think.
hmm.
So when that question gets posed to me and they say, "I don't like the way you're living your life," my answer is, "Great, you're not supposed to. It's not yours."
But Amber, if somebody says that the way you're leading your life, you are going to be doomed,
Mhm.
versus a well wisher saying that, how about if you try this?
Yeah.
I think the wordings change a little. I mean, you're saying the same thing.
You are. I think the biggest question that people need to ask themselves is when somebody is giving advice, what is the purpose of them giving that advice?
Exactly.
Have they taken the time to ask questions to find out whether what they believe is even relevant to this person, right? So if
Mm,
I'm talking to somebody and they say, "Hey, I'd love to ask your opinion on this. What do you think I should do with my business?" I don't answer that. I start asking them questions about what they actually want their business to be, because
mm,
what I think they should do with their business doesn't matter. So I'm actually really critical and a little bit hesitant when I'm in a situation where people are giving unsolicited advice,
mm,
because frankly, that advice is coming from the point of view of the person speaking it, not the point of view of the person receiving it, and maybe completely irrelevant. So,
mm,
the advice I would give to people is when you're in that situation, take a minute to ask yourself whether the person that's giving you advice has ever been where you want to go. I heard
mm,
one of the best quotes probably 4 months ago, and it said, "Stop asking for directions from people who have never been where you're going."
mm. That's so true.
Yeah.
And before this whole recording, thank you, Amber, by the way. But before the recording, um, we were talking about. I think someone asked you about entrepreneurship
Yeah.
and the life of that. So
Yeah.
now the question is that you know what entrepreneur is, and so do I, and we know what that lifestyle is. Okay, or it's gonna be depending on whoever is listening here,
Mhm.
right? And a person who does not know nothing about it and they know everything about that corporate job, how do you motivate them, or how do you tell them the truth that it's not for everybody?
Yeah, and I feel like this is really important. We were talking about this before we came on, and I feel like this is a big gap in the personal development space. Is these people that are meant to be in corporate positions, they thrive there, they love it there, and they also have no work life harmony, which makes them think they need to leave their corporate job.
Hmm.
not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes you don't figure out whether you're meant to be an entrepreneur or not until you try it and you realize that it's not for you, which is the way most things go. There's a couple of things that I can offer here. First of all, anytime I'm working with a new client, the first thing I ask them to do is define success for themselves.
Mm.
I believe every single person needs to define what success means. And I'm not talking about that bullshit answer of freedom
Right.
or
Money.
happiness or
Right.
what or money or
Right.
whatever, because those words mean nothing.
Right.
I want to know, when you sit down at the end of 2 years from now and you're living your perfect life, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How
Mm.
many hours are you working? Are you working for somebody? Do you have a boss? Is it because for some people, working a 9 to 5 and going home and spending time with their family is what success is to them. And
Mm.
what they need to do is find a job that allows them to have that time with their family, not quit
Mm.
their job completely and join an entrepreneur world where we will work 80 hours for ourselves to avoid working 40 for someone else. For somebody else like myself, I can't imagine working for somebody else who has any control over my schedule ever again.
Mm.
To
Mm.
me, that is like a slow death that I just don't want
Mm.
to live, right?
Yeah.
With that comes sometimes the up and downs of, where's payroll going to come from?
Mm.
Where's my time going to come from? It comes with the requirement that I plan my year in advance.
Mm.
And I miss out on a lot of things that I otherwise might be able to take advantage of because I have my own stuff going on.
Mm.
And if I don't have 4, 5, 6 months notice, I may not be able to jump on a cruise ship and go the
That's
same way that somebody that works a 9 to 5 could say, hey, can I have next week off? Right. So for me, it all starts with understanding what success looks and feels like for you. I
Mm.
have a life wheel that I give to every single one of my clients when I first start working with it. Are you familiar with what the life wheel looks like?
No, please tell me.
So the life wheel, and I have a free life wheel for your guests if they would like it, so I can give that information out at the end.
Yeah, please.
Um, However, the life wheel looks like a Trivial Pursuit piece. It's a circle. It has different categories. So if you picture 9 different sections,
Mm.
I guess it would be 8 sections because it's even. And
Mm.
it's going to be things like money, career, spirituality, relationships,
Mm.
health. And all of these are different areas of the life. Unfortunately, many times when we're trying to find out why we're not fulfilled and why we're not happy, we look at these things individually. And
Mm.
this is why you constantly see that person who says, well, I'm not happy. And everybody tells me it must be my job. So I'm going to
Mm.
quit my job and I'm going to go do something else. And then they're not happy. So the next thing everybody tells them it must be is their relationship. So they're
Mm.
going to leave their spouse or their significant other.
Mm.
Now they're single and they're unhappy and they're jobless
Mm.
and they're still unhappy. So it must be where I live. So I'm going to pick up and I'm going to relocate, right?
Mm.
So we go through this trial by error, and the common denominator is often something deep within us
Mm.
that we are trying to find through materialistic experiences
Mhm.
that are never going to fill that void. So
Yeah.
when I start working with a client, when you do this life wheel, there's a spoke in the middle where that's a 0. And
Mm.
then the outer rim is a 10. And you rank yourself in each one of those areas where
Mm.
you believe you fall from 0 to 10. And it's completely subjective.
Mm.
People ask me, Amber, what do relationships mean? I don't know. What do they mean to you? Because that's what's going to dictate what you put in this life wheel. What does a relationship mean to you, and how well are you living that definition?
Mm.
Based on what your lowest categories are, then you
Mm.
start to look at, how do I change this?
Mm.
How do I improve this? And you know where you want to start working. So let's talk about that corporate individual that we were just talking about before. Maybe they do the life wheel and they find out that they love their job. They thrive in their job.
Mm.
They love the amount of money they make. They thrive in that.
Mm.
But they don't like the fact that they haven't seen their kids in a week and a half. They
Mm.
don't like the fact that they're 100 pounds overweight,
Mm.
whatever that happens to be. So then, instead of talking about, let's get you out of your job and start you into an entrepreneur world that you aren't going to love, let's start talking about how you set boundaries so that
Mm,
you can go to the gym and be home with your family for dinner every night.
mhm,
That is what designing your life really means. And it
mm,
requires you to have an individualized definition of what success means to you in
mm,
every single area of that life wheel.
mm. Wow, that's crazy. Thank you so much for those nuggets that you have shared. I mean, it sounds like um, a design a wheel of fortune, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And the the interesting thing about it, and this is where it gets a little counterintuitive, is everybody thinks, "Oh, I need to make sure that everything's at a 10."
Mm,
Right? So when I teach this, I ask people to imagine that whatever that life wheel looks like, which normally it looks a little jagged, right? Because there's always areas of our life we're happy with and areas of our life that we're not.
mm,
So whatever that life wheel looks like, imagine that that turns and that that's what your life runs on.
mm,
Now imagine that you're back in the Stone Ages and
mm,
we're in the Flintstones movie and you're in a car and you have four of these and you're pedaling and you're hitting that pothole every single time.
mm,
Wouldn't you rather have a life that's well balanced at fours?
mm.
And then you can start to expand that well balanced life
Right.
out to the eight, nines, and tens.
Mm,
But people look at it and say, I'm so close to a 10. So I'm going to dig into my career more. And
mm,
all they do is deepen that pothole that exists between that and the rest of their life. So it's
mm,
kind of this, and this is why I don't use the word work life balance, because work life balance doesn't exist. It is a harmonious conversation between about 100 different parts of your life and
right.
decisions that you get to make. And you get to decide what harmony looks like. I don't
Mm,
have kids. I never wanted kids. I'm single. I want to be in a relationship and I am working on manifesting that for myself. But for the first 38 years of my life, that was not my priority.
mm.
And everybody in my life told me that was wrong. And I had to say, maybe it's wrong for you, but this is what I want.
Because that's the design that you created for yourself. It's not for everybody, right? I
It's
mean,
not for everybody. And, this kind of goes back to what you were talking about before, because we all have those influences.
mm,
I grew up in a very religious town.
mm,
And in my town, the idea that you don't want kids is unheard of. The
mm,
idea that you would want to forego a family for a career is just blasphemy. I
mm,
can't tell you how many times I got told you should get married and have a family. And if God wants you to have a career, then he will create the path for you to do that.
mm.
I am not judging anybody who believes that. It's just not the way that I wanted to live my life. And did I make sacrifices to get here? Yes.
Of
Were
course.
some of those sacrifices unintentional because I didn't understand what I was doing? Yes. Am I happy with the life that I have now? I wouldn't change it for the world.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, Amber, for that. But I want everyone to realize this, and I want you to hear this also, Amber, that life is definitely not perfect, right?
Always.
We're always going to be designing it. So I will have to push back a little when you said rate from 0 to 10, because we're not every time perfect. So I will always rate 9, because there's always room for improvement. This is just my theory. Maybe
I
it's wrong.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think a 10 is, and I should have added in that I believe a well harmonious life is somewhere between an 8 and a 9 in all areas of life, or a 7 and a 9 in all areas of life. I should also add that when I work with clients, they do a life wheel quarterly,
Hmm.
because I believe that your goals, where you're at, and what you want to work on change throughout. And so I am constantly discussing with my clients, what does success mean to you now? What have
Hmm.
you learned in the last 90 days that inform where you want your life to be? Because we are constantly learning and growing, and our definition of success has to reflect that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for understanding from my point of view.
Yes.
And because sometimes it's just not perfect, and I totally agree. When someone calls up from customer service and they say rate them, I usually don't give it 10.
Yeah.
There's rarely I give them a 10. You should be lucky that you got a 9. Okay. So because there's always a chance to improve yourself, and that's how life is. So
Agreed.
Amber, thank you again for answering that question, and thank you again for that. But and I'll be starting this in season 3, a new segment in the show, and I wanted to start today just for a hell of it. But let me ask you this: what books are you reading
Ooh.
lately, related to what we have discussed, or even totally out of the norm? Or what movie do you watching that it
Ooh.
really inspires you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So first of all, I love this question so much. And I feel like we need a whole nother podcast episode for me to answer it.
Sure.
Um, books and movies. So I'm gonna give you my favorites. And they are a little bit out there. So my absolute most recommended book for anybody who is just starting on understanding this process is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Hmm.
Um, it is by far my most recommended book ever, by Mark Manson. And it really digs in and talks about the fact that life is about solving problems, not avoiding them.
Hmm.
And that by making certain choices, we
Hmm.
are choosing to solve bigger problems.
Hmm.
So I loved that approach because I feel like there's a lot of us that believe, I was one of these, that if I just did enough stuff, that I wouldn't have to solve any problems because life would be perfect. And
Hmm.
I had to understand that getting a law degree didn't solve my problems. It just made different problems
Hmm.
for me to have to solve.
Hmm.
So I love that book. There is a book by Michael Coles,
Hmm.
who is absolutely fantastic, called Time to Get Tough.
Hmm.
Michael Coles is in Atlanta, Georgia. There's a business school named out of him. He's the founder of the Great American Cookie Company. So
Hmm.
his book is called Time to Get Tough: How Cookies, Coffee, and a Crash Led to Success in Business and Life.
Hmm.
This is something that I recommend as my second most recommended book
Hmm.
because it talks about all of the different careers that he had and how each of those informed who he is now, which I think is different than that person who says, I always wanted to do this. And then
Hmm.
he talks about struggles and, you know, after crashing his bike, he has 3 world records for riding from Atlanta, Georgia to San Diego, California on a pedal bike.
Wow.
So he's so full of business knowledge. So it's a business book that doesn't feel like a business book.
Wow.
I could go on and on, but I'll stop with books. Movies. Um, there is a movie called Making Maverick. Sorry, I mixed them up. It's called Chasing Mavericks. It's the story of Jay Moriarty, who is a really well-known professional surfer who unfortunately passed away at the age of 18. When
Hmm.
he was 16, he became famous for choosing to surf some of the biggest waves in California.
Hmm.
That movie is about his training process. It's about his relationship with his coach and what he learned and how he became the person who could surf those waves.
Hmm.
On the flip side of that, there's a book called Making Mavericks that is written by his coach about how he became the type of person who could coach at Jay Moriarty. So
Hmm.
both of those are fantastic. Um, and then the last one that I'll say, which is both a book and a movie, is The Peaceful Warrior,
Hmm.
which is an absolutely fantastic series. The movie is good, but then there's a whole series of books on The Peaceful Warrior. So I will stop there so I don't overwhelm everybody, but there's just so many to pick from.
Yeah, thank you again. Because sometimes people they think that whatever the topic that we're talking about on Back to Basics, we do have other lives too. And I
Hmm.
want people to understand that reading is an awesome thing. I mean, all the books that you see here at the back is all the guest that gives me books, and I'm so honored. And soon as this season is over, you know what I'm going to be doing, right? I'm going to catch
Yeah.
on one of these paragraphs at least, and start sharing them, because there's so much of nuggets behind me and the nuggets that you have given me, and I'll just add it to the list. Thanks again, Amber, for that and adding to the list.
Of course. I think one of the things that I could definitely improve on, and I was having this conversation with somebody at Podfest, is I used to read a lot of nonfiction books,
Mm, mm,
fiction books. I used to read a lot of fiction books. And when I went to law school, I really quit reading. And then when I became a entrepreneur, I started reading nonfiction business-based books. Um, and I really think that we as entrepreneurs could really learn from digging back into that creative side that is a story-based
Mhm.
book instead of a business-based book. So
Mhm.
I would love to ask your audience and you to share with me throughout time, if they comment on this or whatever, their favorite non-business based books
Mm.
that can allow business owners and entrepreneurs to increase their creativity.
Wow. I have to think about this now, Amber.
I know, right?
You're giving me too much to think here. I have to
That's the
think.
goal.
That
That's how
is
I
the
know
goal.
I've done my
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, there you go. So I will definitely tell you that offline. How about that?
I like it.
Okay. But before you leave, Amber, do you have any last words to all my viewers and my listeners? And how was your journey on Back to Basics finally that you're here?
This has been an incredible conversation. You ask such thoughtful questions that I really appreciate. And they're so open ended that allow the episode to be whatever it's going to be, which is something that I also appreciate. We've covered so much that is overreaching in what I do. I think the only thing that I would leave it with is be willing to do things that scare you. So much of my journey to being a business owner and entrepreneur started because I did obstacle course racing. And
Mm.
the more I pushed myself out of my comfort zone physically, the more I was willing to push myself out of my comfort zone in other areas of my life, including business and personal relationships. So, if you feel like you're stuck, start asking yourself what you could do that's new that you haven't ever done before, because that's going to reignite a fire in you of what you're actually passionate about. And you
Mm.
may find an interest that you didn't know you had that can then be part of pushing you forward in other areas of your life. So I would just say get uncomfortable every day.
Thank you so much for Amber for coming here, and thank you for those small nuggets that you've given us. And we're definitely going to be friends even offline, aren't we?
Agreed.
And you are an amazing person. You definitely should come back on season 3. We should talk about movies. We should talk about books. I mean, we can just go on. So thank
I
you again.
feel like we could have a whole episode on going back and forth with our favorite movies and why. And I think we should. I think like we should do. Have you ever heard of a smash cast?
Yes.
So I think we should do a smash cast on books and movies and then just release it on our podcasts, because I
Yeah.
think that's such a cool topic.
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
we'll make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. So, guys, thank you again, Amber. Thank you again for coming here. So we will keep in touch. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, guys, we spoke with Amber today, and we talked about the work-life balance, or I should say design balance, right? Because she doesn't like the work-life balance. Now, there is a quote of the day, and hopefully Amber will like the quote of the day from Back to Basics. The quote is, create a life that feels good on the inside, not the one just looks on the outside, because that's what we usually do, right? We have to design it from the inside. We don't really kind of care for the outside. Well, don't tell anyone that. Now, as usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, keep on commenting on all the episodes that I've done so far, because with your help, my support will be stronger day by day, because I do release every day and the season's almost over. And there are 3 things, according to this episode, that makes it a hit for me, that is, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next time on Back to Basics. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Podcast, then I put it on hold for a while and called it Unfiltered. And it really is the sister podcast to what you have, because I believe in keeping things foundational, keeping things, too many people want to complicate life. They want to complicate their own life. They want to complicate their businesses. And when you keep things simple, not simplistic, but simple, you don't need to introduce drama and complexity into your life. So back to basics means going back to our roots, going back to the things that matter most to us. And when we show up authentically in our most basic form and things that matter to us, people will